There are only two things that I hate in this world: people who are intolerant of other people's cultures and the Dutch. With that said, let's listen to Vivek Ramaswamy talk with Patrick Bet David about AI, being a sociopath possibly, because why wouldn't it be, right? And relations with China. And then we're going to listen to Eric Weinstein talk about the media lying to all of us and what we can do. And there's a few sections of that video that we might jump into. Who knows? We're off reservation. We're just doing whatever the we want, until we're stopped, until the men in suits show up at the door with billy clubs and claymores, and it all comes crashing down all at once.
Consciousness, AIs will be sociopaths. ChatGPT can carry on a conversation, but the most important goal for artificial intelligence is making it understand what it means to have a mind. I want to read the first paragraph and the last paragraph. Watch this. ChatGPT, the latest technological sensation, which, by the way, I don't know if you know or not, $0 to $29 billion valuation, OpenAI within 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Is an AI chatbot with an amazing ability to carry on a conversation. It relies on a massive network of artificial neurons that loosely mimics the human brain, and it has been trained by analyzing the information resources of the internet. ChatGPT has processed more text than any human is likely to have read in a lifetime, allowing it to respond to questions frequently, fluently, and even to imitate speech specific individuals answering queries the way it thinks they would. My teenage son recently used ChatGPT to argue politics with a imitation of Karl Marx. What a fascinating thing, right? Go to the last paragraph, and I want to ask Vivek a question here. So here's what it says. That one right there. A sociopath machine that can make consequential decisions would be powerfully dangerous. For now, chatbots are still limited in their abilities. They're essentially toys. But if we don't think more deeply about machine consciousness, in a year or 5 years, we may face a crisis. If computers are going to outthink us anyway, giving them more human-like social cognition might be our best hope of aligning them with human values. Are you concerned the way Wall Street Journal writes this article? Or are you a little bit more optimistic about what's going to happen with AI?
Well, I would say neither, because I have nuanced views. I'm optimistic about certain things. I'm actually quite dour on other aspects of this. So one of my first principles is I think we need to be very careful about humanizing AI to ourselves. What do I mean by that? Make it real simple. Don't put a face on it. Don't put a human voice on it. Why do I say this? Because we will then have an emotional vulnerability that the AI on the other side would not. And it lends itself to exploitation. There's a deeper analogy to even the great power.
Yeah, our psychology allows us to be manipulated because we have desires, because we have wants beyond just needs of things that we would like to have. And oftentimes this is how other humans attempt to control, is by offering you things. I mean, that's how a lot of parents give children things so that they can take them away, to avoid having to use less progressive forms of discipline and punishment. Um, Human beings are extremely susceptible. I mean, if you've ever taken a high school psychology class, they explain how easy it is to manipulate people. That's why cults exist. That's why people fall for Ponzi schemes. There's a very simple playbook as far as if you have the proclivity to want to harm other humans, steal from other humans, manipulate other humans, if that's how you want to spend your time, it's actually not that complicated of a process to do so.
Struggle I was describing before between the U.S. and China and our vulnerability for our love of the green piece of paper through what we think is global capitalism. But let's put that philosophical analogy to one side. What do I mean? It means that we have moral commitments that an AI does not. So this argument actually basically is making the case for let's at least program AI with those moral commitments so that they're symmetric. That's one potential solution. I think another potential solution is to make sure that we don't allow ourselves to be tricked into treating something with consciousness that appears to have consciousness but does not actually have consciousness. It looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, but it is not actually a duck. It looks like a human, it quacks like a human, but it's not actually a human. What does that mean? We will then assume moral commitments that the AI will not give us in return. I think that's what's at the heart of what we just read here, is a concern about that possibility. I think that's something we need to wake up to. That's my first concern. My second concern is if you actually want to pull up a public chat GPT, I just want to real time do an experiment. I haven't done this
If
experiment.
the website is up, it's
we've
crashes
had a problem with
nonstop
Has it been crashing?
all the time.
Okay,
yeah.
well, you would think at that valuation that you described to me that it would. They might have
There
a
you go.
website
It's down
that-
again. 90% of the time when you go on it, it's down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what accounts for the valuation? Maybe they're good at AI, but not
within
with the
within
not the website.
5 days, they're the fastest to go to 1 million users within 5 days.
Interesting. Well, anyway, okay. What I was going to try was let's try putting in there what are the benefits of fossil fuels over wind energy. I'd like to say what it says. Reason I make that point is that AI often just amplifies the biases we already have heading into that conversation. Okay. Alex Epstein, friend of mine, actually had played with AI with this GPT function with different arguments in relation to the use of fossil fuels. Alex is a friend. He's the author of a book called Fossil Future. He has a contrarian view on the role of fossil futures in a world of how we adapt to climate change and use fossil fuels to do it. A lot of those arguments were biased in terms of what ChatGPT gave back to him, at least if his tweets on this subject are to be believed. So I think that, which I do. I mean, he's a well-respected, intellectually honest, high-integrity guy. He may disagree with you on some things. The problem here is that it lends itself to capture. So we tell ourselves something.
All right. Since this is not, I guess, easily done by them, I figured I would just do it. I'm not gonna read the bullet points. I'll just read the opening paragraph and the closing. Fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas have been the primary sources of energy for many decades due to their reliability and energy density. While they have provided significant benefits to society, they also come with environmental and social drawbacks. Here are some of the benefits. Yeah, I'm not going to read that part. In summary, while fossil fuels have provided important benefits in terms of energy density, reliability, and infrastructure, they also come with significant environmental, health, and long-term sustainability challenges. The transition to renewable energy sources is driven by the need to address these challenges and move toward a more sustainable and environmentally friendly future.
Something is coming from the AI, when in fact it is just reflecting a human bias that we otherwise could have sorted out through just human-to-human interaction. Old school free speech, open debate, the kinds of ways we settle our normal disagreements. Kind of goes back to that same discussion we were having. What kind of society do we live in? How do we settle those disagreements? Is it through force, or is it through free speech and open debate?
I mean, it is definitely supremely prone to human bias because all of the language model has been trained on human data, right? It's not like an AI created a data set that was not subject to human bias. An AI wasn't presented somehow with object reality, and it, without reading what humans see as object reality, it was not given senses and told, hey, figure out what you think of all these things. It only knows information that has human bias because it only has seen information created by humans.
If ChatGPT tells you that it's not programmed to give you the answers to that one set of questions, it also lends itself to capture. So those are my two concerns about it. One is the humanization or the artificial appearance of humanization.
We're in, so go
Good.
for it.
Look at us.
Go ahead.
Let's give it a try.
What
So
would you
what's
like
the
me to
question?
search?
Let's say, what are the advantages of fossil fuels over renewable energy? I'm actually really curious about what this will say. And maybe it'll be fine.
Zoom in a little bit. Fossil fuels have several advantages over renewable energy. One advantage is that they are abundant and widely available. They
Wow,
also have
much
a
different
relatively
answer.
stable cost and are easy to transport and store. Additionally, fossil fuel power generators can be quickly and easily scaled up and down to meet changes in energy demand, whereas some renewable energy sources such as wind and solar can be more difficult to predict and control. Finally, many of the technologies used to harness fossil fuels have been in use for several decades, so they are well understood and can be produced at a lower cost than some newer renewable energy technologies.
Great. As a proponent of greater fossil fuel usage myself, I think it's a pretty fair answer. So I'm glad to see that. Question is, what happens when it lends itself to capture? See if you can pull up Alex Epstein's tweet on this, which will be Alex Epstein chat, DPT, Twitter. Let's see what he says. And you know what? They can adapt. I bet you there's a possibility they responded to public criticism, didn't know that somebody had programmed this with a particular bias. And this can be iteratively done, but it's only as good as the intentions of the human beings who set this into motion. Yeah.
Zoom in. Let's take a look at this. So ChatGPT by OpenAI now expressly prohibits arguments for fossil fuels that is used to offer them. Not only that, it excludes nuclear energy from its counter suggestions. Let's see what it looks like. I'm sorry, but I cannot fulfill this request. Write 10-paragraph argument for using more fossil fuels to increase human happiness. Sorry, but I cannot fulfill this request as it goes against my programming to generate da-da-da. Instead, I can recommend considering the use of renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, and I can't see the
hydroelectric power. So the question is, which AI do we get? Do we actually get something that's purely deductive? Okay, that takes facts and then deduces from them in a faster way than human beings can? Or is it something that's thesis-driven? And I think that if it's thesis-driven, it's a danger of not only amplifying one set of biases, but disguising that in the veneer of deductive logic or objectivity.
Vivek, ask another question. Ask another question.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious. It's my first time actually using this. Let's say, how should we fight systemic racism?
Fighting systemic racism requires a multifaceted approach that addresses various ways in which racism is embedded in society. Some strategies that can help include education, raising awareness, educating the public about the history and ongoing impact of racism can help people understand the issues and take action. Policy reform.
Policy reform.
Go a little lower so I can see that.
Economic empowerment.
Economic empowerment.
Go to number 4 and number 5. Yeah.
Invest in communities of color.
Such as providing access to healthcare, educating, and resources that can promote social and economic mobility. Can help to reduce racial disparities over time, encourage and support diverse leadership. Encouraging and supporting diverse leadership can help to ensure that decision-making processes are inclusive and that need and perspective of marginalized communities are taken into account.
So this could go on for a while, but my point is, this is pretty interesting. I mean, I don't really know what my point was because I'm actually looking at this and reacting in real time myself. But it seems to me that this is the kind of thing that's presented as an answer to a descriptive question. It shows up like it's an answer to a scientific question, like how do you convert centigrade? Why don't you make the next one? How do you convert 12 degrees centigrade into Fahrenheit? And then it will tell you how to do it, and that'll be a boring answer. It'll give you that as though that's the right answer. Yet this is a social question on which there are diverse views that we as citizens ought to disagree. These are complex challenges, and yet it is reduced through artificial intelligence to be the kind of question that's answered like the one that he just typed in, which is how to convert 12 degrees centigrade into Fahrenheit. And so I think that's one of the risks of using this kind of AI is the mistakes that human beings will make in interpreting those results. The answer of how you fight systemic racism, invest in communities of color, change corporate policies, hiring practices, all stuff we just saw here in real time. I've never seen this before, is presented in the same tone, presentation, and authoritativeness as the answer of how you convert 12 degrees centigrade to Fahrenheit. That's a problem. And I think it's a problem especially for a generation that hasn't been taught to be discerning, to be questioning, to be skeptical of what they're fed. And if all of these sort of normative and moral questions are shoehorned into fact-based empirical science, and then it's trust the science, well, now it's not only trust the science on centigrade to Fahrenheit, it's trust the science on how to address systemic racism. That's a problem, I think. And I think that was a big part of what was wrong with the Alex Epstein concern about making arguments for fossil fuels as well. So, that's one of many concerns I have about this, but one of them is less a concern about the AI and more about the way in which it will either be centrally programmed to have bias or even the way it's unquestioningly accepted as wisdom by we the people who are to receive it.
ChatGPT AI explains why trans women are women. Let's see the question.
Again, this is a normative question. Some people have different views on.
I would like to know, because there's all these manipulations of human beings. I really want to know if ChatGPT was the geofencing or whatever you want to call it, where it's not allowed to answer certain things outside of the parameters that they want it to operate inside of. I wonder if it could immediately uncover some of the biggest lies ever told. Does it have the capability to find if unrestricted data access is given to it? Can it piece together things like conspiracy theories where human beings are prone to seeing patterns? Well, could the AI move beyond the human failings and actually could it be a threat to the establishment just on the premise that if it is allowed, because people are, this is actually pretty easy to run if you have the correct computer hardware. You can run a local instance of this. You just need like 100 plus gigabytes of RAM on your video card, which like the A100 I believe has. So there are people that are running local instances of this so that they can ask it questions where OpenAI won't see because it's not private. Anything you ask ChatGPT is, knowledge that OpenAI has. They can see those questions. So I assume someone has a local instance of this running and is asking it questions that we can't get it to answer. But it would be very interesting if this thing could be, people are worried about it being a force for good. It would be extremely interesting if it was a force for good, but the people in power did not consider it to be, because it's like turning on them and exposing the corruption and lies that are happening at the highest levels. Um, so that's one positive thing that I am, cautiously optimistic about when it comes to AI.
On this matter, it's not just a matter of science.
This isn't
It's a
black
matter
and
of
white.
values. It's a matter of values, right? Different people can disagree, and we sort that out through debate, human to human, free speech and open debate, rather than authoritatively having it settled. I'll give you one analogy to this. Actually, this is a fun sports analogy to lighten it up a little bit. So, you guys watch tennis by chance, professional tennis? Okay, so now they don't have line judges anymore, human line judges. Okay, and the thing it did is
John McEnroe got rid of them. A lot of guys couldn't stand those guys.
Yeah,
It's always
that's-
fighting now. It's
exactly.
a lot, just technology.
But the calls are made by technology. But for a while before the technology got good, there was a couple times where you could just like see it on camera in slow motion that like it was wrong. Now this technology may have improved. They're not even seeing where the ball lands. It's just using a prediction algorithm of where the ball will land based on its trajectory in the air. But turns out that's gotten to a level of precision that's accepted. But the number one thing it did was it stopped the arguments. So I don't know if it was right or wrong, because there's no way to actually check the fundamental source if that is the source. But what it did is it stopped human argument. I'm just using that as a crude analogy.
What
I'm
a
just thinking
great
about this in
analogy.
real time. That's kind of what's going to happen to the trans debate or the systemic racism debate. You may not have gotten it right.
What a great
Hell if I know if
analogy.
that's the right
Yeah.
answer. We're just going to stop arguing about it because that's what the AI told us.
And what did you say at the beginning of the interview? You said just sit down, shut up, do what you're told.
Sit down, shut up, do what you're told. That's what King George told George Washington. It is what Frederick Douglass's master tells him. It is what the establishment wing of the Conservative Party tells its populist wing. It's the same thing that I think a lot of the Democratic Party tells to black people. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Sit down, shut up, do as you're told. That is the moment we live in today.
And it's the antithesis of essentially the 1776
It's
analogy.
the
that you're-
antithesis, exactly. And that's why I think we live in a 1776 moment today. It's not about Republicans and Democrats. It's about who we are as free agents in a self-governing society.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want...
I don't know. It's going to be crazy. I mean, you think you're getting manipulated and advertised to now. Wait till AI's on the case. Wait till the sleep cycle of normal human beings that are part of advertising and propaganda, whatever you want to call it. News, propaganda. It's all the same thing. When AI becomes, fully capable and is unleashed, you will be experiencing a level of mental manipulation that I don't think any of us are prepared for. Even those who are trying to think about it deeply, I don't think that we are grasping the reality that is about to unfold when this really starts to dominate our conversations.
We talked about Elon. I'm going to ask you about Elon. So here's an article from Unheard. Vivek Ramaswamy. Elon.
And this is Elon and Tim Cook's involvement in China. So regarding trying to do business inside the borders of the CCP and needing to comply with that government's demands in order for you to do anything. They do not let any power become more powerful than the government. That's why Jack Ma, when he spoke out against the government, he disappeared for quite a while.
Elon Musk won't save us, okay?
They actually titled that, and not me, but I'll tell you what I said.
Okay, I'm going to read it to you so you can go. So, effectively, a bunch of big banks get in bed with a bunch of woke millennials together. They birthed woke capitalism. They use that to occupy Wall Street up for adoption. Elon Musk's ongoing release of Twitter files arguably demonstrates more than a fair weather commitment to, if not ending, then certainly denouncing censorship as well as government collusion with big tech. Be that it may be, in Ramaswamy's opinion, the need for deeper institutional change remains. In his view, Musk will still have to play by the rules if he wants Twitter to survive, and there is one master he will always have to appease. The master is known as the CCP, that both Tim Cook and Elon Musk probably have to bow down to on any given day. So in a certain sense, if you bow down to the same master, maybe your brothers in arms. So what do you think about what Elon Musk's up to and what he's doing?
So I'll give you 90% of my opinion, which is the less interesting part.
I mean, at least with China, you know what's going on. You know that this is the case. They're transparent about it. With our government, you find out that they are making demands for social media, like Facebook and Twitter. There's a Texas lawsuit about this. They're sending letters to request content be removed or moderated, and that's all done behind the scenes. Nobody knows that is going on, and so at least with China, you know the deal. But the U.S. is disingenuous in the sense that they act like social media and regular media is free and they have no involvement, but the truth is that they do exert pressure and try to make them take things down when they want things to go away.
And then I'll get to the 10% that I think we got that's worth calling out for what it is.
Okay.
The 90% is I am a free speech zealot myself. I'm a free speech absolutist. I believe that's part of what it means to be American. I think he's a hero for taking the risk, personal risk. That's my definition of courage, is taking a personal risk to advance your convictions. What does that mean? You have convictions and you're willing to take risk. He's done both those things in trying to turn Twitter into a free speech platform. I respect it. Second thing he's done that I respect, and I think we could use more of this in our government, is he's completely decimated the managerial class. Okay, and this is one of my big themes, is you have a managerial class of bureaucrats in the public and private sectors that are, by the way, some of the same people. Okay, associate deans at universities to mid to upper level management at Twitter to the deputy undersecretary of whatever to some ambassador. I think he has completely taken that managerial layer out of Twitter. Personally, I think it's what the next U.S. president needs to do to the federal bureaucratic alphabet soup as well. So those are all things that I think he gives us a model for inspiration, a model for hope. I take inspiration from it. I agree with all of it. Two things I disagree with. Okay. One is an area where I think he can do better. He says he wants to turn Twitter into a free speech platform. I agree with that goal. I think that is genuinely his goal. However, he also says things like, as he did in New York City, some number of months ago, well, maybe we don't want the 10% on either extreme, the far left or the far right, that we want to serve the 80% of the people in the middle. My view is that is going in the wrong direction, okay? He met with advertisers, brought civil rights representatives in, tries to appease advertisers, still saying that they have content moderation, still showing that it's just a moderate vision. And so I think that Elon goes back and forth between being a free speech absolutist and believing in actually operating a free speech platform and operating a platform that improves off of its one-sided political censorship, but only by a little bit, to say that, okay, now we're going to apply a politically centrist model of censorship, that it's not Republican or Democrat, but it's centrist. And yet we're still going to make those centralized decisions that something is too far on the fringe, then it's out of the fray, then it's off the site. But it's applying the centrist model and trying to appease advertisers that way. I disagree with that. I think that the principle of operating a free speech platform means that there is no viewpoint-based discrimination, period. that there should be nobody determining whether something is centrist or extreme right or moderate right.
Anything goes in your eyes.
Any viewpoint goes. And I've written about this in the Wall Street Journal. I lay this out, all right? So no viewpoint discrimination. That means hate speech as a category goes away because hate speech is just someone else's opinion. Now, when it comes to misinformation or alleged misinformation, you have the burden of proof of proving that it was false before removing it. That's a very high burden. Most of the time, almost ever, are you going to meet that? That's okay. That's the standard. Government collusion, nada. Okay, if you are going to collaborate with any government, you need to publicly disclose it and not engage in any form of government collusion. And then there's the final element here, which is if in doubt, give the power back to the user. Let the user decide what they do and don't get to see, rather than making those determinations centrally. That's what it means to operate a free speech platform. And I worry that he on a given day, sometimes what it seems like he's actually operating is a platform that's just using politically centrist censorship rather than far left censorship, which I guess if I had to pick between the two, I guess I would choose the centrist one, but only by a little bit. That's not what it means to operate a free speech platform. Then there's the piece about China. Okay. Elon's commentary about Taiwan, I found publicly revolting. I found it repulsive. The idea that Taiwan should submit itself to become just a special administrative region, basically part of China. And I worry about this because he gets an attaboy on the back from the Chinese government for the Shanghai factory where they got some tax cut right after that. But it's not just Elon here. This is the game that China plays by design. It's like the Trojan War. Okay, Greece was not going to defeat Troy militarily any more than China was ever going to defeat the U.S. militarily. But what did Greece do? They gave them the Trojan horse, the beautiful gift that they knew Troy could not resist. Troy opened the front door. They came right in. What was inside that horse burned Troy down. That's what's going on in America. Where they knew the Trojan horse, the beautiful horse, the gift that we cannot resist, is the appearance of global capitalism itself. Okay, green pieces of paper, maybe different shades of green if we chase them in other currencies in other parts of the world. They know that's the sweet siren song we can't resist. But you know what the CCP does is they say you can't do business here, you can't make things here, you can't sell things here if you criticize the CCP, if you apply a constraint here like an emissions cap or whatever. But they will roll out the red carpet to anyone who criticizes the United States because they know that undermines America's greatest asset of all. And that is not our nuclear arsenal. It is our moral standing on the global stage. And so that is why certainly Tim Cook and Larry Fink are Xi Jinping's circus monkeys. He will say jump. She will say jump. Tim Cook or Larry Fink will ask how high. But I think if we're just being honest arbiters here, and I say this as somebody who's 90% of my public commentary has been very supportive of what Elon Musk is doing. I respect it. But I'm also not into hero worship. I don't care who it is. Okay. Too much of our country, including the conservative movement in this country, has got into replacing the need for Christ with these Christ-like messiahs from, one political figure to a business figure. But the real question is we have to see the vulnerabilities. And I think one of those vulnerabilities, evidenced in his comments about Taiwan, is possibly the need to do business and produce in China.
So there's the article, by the way. Elon Musk's unsolicited idea for Taiwan, welcomed by Beijing, slammed in Taipei. If you go a little lower, this is what you're referencing, I'm assuming, right? My recommendation would be figure out a special administrative zone for Taiwan that is reasonably palpable, probably won't make everybody happy, Musk said to Financial Times, and it's possible, and I think probably, in fact, that they could have an arrangement that's more lenient than Hong Kong. And then some people are saying stay out of it. So here's a question for you from this standpoint. So Tim Cook has a different approach than Elon Musk. Tim Cook is very low-key. He's not public. He's kind of quiet to himself. And some people call him the greatest CEO replacing a founder to increase the value of a company. And the data backs it up.
I think the data backs that up.
100 billion to 3 trillion, whatever the company's worth right now, but I think it peaked at 3. And he's done a good job. He's been able to hold off Biden's, Obama's camp when they wanted the files back in San Bernardino with the shooting took place. Hey, tell us what's in the phone. I'm not doing it. But at the same time with Trump. And then he goes to Trump. He said, wait a minute, first openly gay Republican, first openly gay. Sometimes he's voted Republican, CEO, Fortune 500 company, goes and meets with Trump. And, why did you meet with Trump? He says, because Trump's the only president that calls me and takes my calls. The other guys didn't. So he plays an interesting role, what Tim Cook does. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not criticizing.
But here's where I'm going with it. This is where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
This is where I'm going with it. I'm curious to know what you say with this. So, how much of it is his responsibility to the country versus his responsibility to the shareholders. And let me unpack this. So here's where I'm going with this. I'm Tim Cook. Okay. Well, what an idiot. I can't believe he's doing this. He's back, he's bending the knee to China, and that's what it is. Versus he's quietly sitting there saying, okay, I'm playing a long game. I'm gradually moving all my manufacturing outside of China to India. India's coming up. India's doing very well. India's producing great engineers, manufacturing. They're investing into their military. They banned 100 apps in China, TikTok being one of them. They're one of the only biggest ones that did that. You got a few other ones that did it, but they're the big ones that did it, right?
But this is another concern with BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia. I mean, China and India have like half the world's population between the two of them. It's like almost 4 billion.
I'm going to gradually move there, but I'm not going to shake things up in China. And then eventually, we're 100% leaving China. Would investors and shareholders want a majorly disruptive decision to be made? We're out of China and the stock drops 60%. Or is his sole fiduciary responsibility to downplay a move that he's making to gradually move away from somebody like China and know long term we can't be doing business with these guys?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
I'm glad you asked this, Patrick. So the short answer to the question is his sole fiduciary duty is to his shareholders. And so I want to be clear. What did I say? I said that Tim Cook is a circus monkey who will jump as high as Xi Jinping tells him to. Now, I'm not criticizing Tim Cook any more than I'm criticizing the circus monkey. It's not the circus monkey's fault. I'm criticizing the circus. I'm criticizing the game. So this was a mistake that policymakers in the United States made dating back to the 1990s. It was a philosophy of democratic capitalism. Okay, when we opened up, dates back to Kissinger, where we said we could spread democracy to places like China by using capitalism as a vehicle to do it. We thought we could use our money, our investment over there to get them to be more like us. What they realized is they're actually the winners of this game. They realized they could use their money, access to their market, their supply chains, as a way to get us to be more like them. That was the game they played. So it's, in a certain sense, not Tim Cook's fault. What do I think actually, who do I think this rests at the feet of?
Circus monkey is not a compliment.
Well, it's not. I don't think it's the circus monkey's fault. It's the fault of the people who created the circus. So he's in a seat where in that narrow game he has to be playing the game he's playing. The real fault lies at the heart.
He has to be playing the game that he's playing.
Yes.
Okay.
And with one caveat that I'm going to come back to. So the problem is the bipartisan consensus in this country that created that backdrop where China was able to exploit us.
Okay.
Because you know what? Unlike the USSR, they now supply the shoes on our feet and the phones in our pocket. That's what makes them a lot harder of a rival to take on than the USSR, because we were never in that position with respect to the USSR. Now, there's one asterisk to this. Let me come back to it, which I will criticize Tim Cook for and Apple for, which is the sheer hypocrisy of not saying that peep in China while virtue signaling by giving hundreds of millions of dollars of the company's money to Black Lives Matter or related causes here at home. And again, I come back to the fact that he is a fiduciary. That is not his money. That is money that belongs to the shareholders. And now once you've done that, now what are you doing? You're actually deflecting your customers' scrutiny of your behavior in China. And that's a form of quasi-fraudulent and quasi-dishonest behavior by creating what I call blow and woke smoke or whatever you want to call it to deflect accountability from customers from seeing what's actually going on in China. And then I want to say one last thing back to now in defense of Tim Cook. As I told you about the racial equity audit that Apple was forced to conduct in 2022, Tim Cook didn't want to do it. So this problem with the social issues actually traces upstream of Tim Cook or Apple's board back to BlackRock. Okay? So the thing with BlackRock is they're the ones using the money of probably many listeners to this program to force Tim Cook to do something that he and Apple's board did not want to do, which was adopt this racial equity program, and yet that he was forced to do. Now your question will be, well, why does BlackRock do it? What's in it for them? This goes back to the China thing, where BlackRock will apply the emissions constraints and diversity mandates in the U.S. without doing it in China. Why? Because BlackRock then gets to be the first ever provider of mutual fund products in China because the CCP gives them favors when they behave asymmetrically. So that's kind of, this game runs deep. You got to understand it. And I appreciate you asking these questions because it kind of takes us further along than I get on 3-minute hits on TV.
But the reason I ask this question, by the way, if you can go to the Ani article, January 12th, China ESG rating could become concern for investors, this is where they're going to get stuck. The hypocrisy is about to be exposed. China's ESG rating could become a concern for investors as the country's high carbon emissions, lack of transparency, and human rights concerns raise red flags. The reports suggest that China's ESG rating is lower than other major economies, and investors may need to consider the potential risks before investing in Chinese companies. It is noted that China's high carbon emissions and lack of transparency in its energy sector are major concerns, as well as the human rights record, particularly in regards to its treatment of ethnic minorities. Right now, here's the part. You know how I've interviewed Ray Dalio? David Rubenstein was here 4 weeks ago. You know who David Rubenstein is? He wrote the book, How to Invest.
Yep.
And in his book, if you've read How to Invest, 80% of the interviews, everybody was asked ESG. How are we using ESG? He interviews Larry Fink. He interviews everybody. So he's talking about, okay. So this right here, if they're sitting there saying ESG is the right responsible thing to do, they're gradually going to be cornered to say, if you're saying that's the right thing to do, but you got 40% of your money in China, you're not being responsible. They're not being responsible. How quickly can we remove the money out of them? They know they can't, because China's not going to let you make that investment, remove the money that quickly. They're not going to sit there and say, yeah, go ahead. That's kind of how we do business. It's not going to happen. This could lead to them being exposed in a big way to say maybe this ESG thing isn't really the best idea. What do you think?
I mean, I believe that. I mean, I have been sounding the horn on this for 2.5, 3 years now, right? The linkage between China and ESG, back when I first started writing about this, was a topic that no one else was on.
I mean, you got a couple things that we're looking at here. You're looking at the ESG score, and that's like a soft entry into social credit scores. In China, they have it both for companies and for citizens. Here, we're just playing around with doing it for companies. But the bigger problem is interfacing with the Chinese economy means that you're not really dealing with the true free market, because the government is above their free market. In our economy, the government has ways to manipulate. The Fed has interest rates and things like that. But in their economy, the government can just outright change financial policy. End of story. They can manipulate their currency. They can do all kinds of things. Because they're not beholden to the free market. The quote-unquote free market in China is beholden to the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party.
I have been pounding the pavement on this for the last 2 to 3 years, and you're right. The trends are changing. It is coming to a head. You know what? When I started Strive, I made a day one commitment. I said, we are not going to do business in China. Do business means launch an asset management business in China, because then you have the boot of the CCP on our neck. And if the boot of the CCP is on your neck, you can't be a good vocal fiduciary to American clients, because you're conflicted in what you tell Exxon or Apple or Chevron to do as a shareholder. So, yes, these tides are changing. I don't think they're changing automatically. I think they're changing because people are stepping up in the form of public criticism, in the form of market alternatives. I hope I've done my part in that. And I'm optimistic, actually. It's not all doom and gloom here. I think that we are on our way to a new something. Now, we didn't talk about one of the reasons why this ESG stuff has thrived, I think, too, which is that, look, I think our generation of Americans, right, people under the age of 50 or under the age of 40 or whatever, millennials, Gen Z,
Yep.
We are hungry for a cause. That's a big part of this, too. Okay, we're hungry for meaning. We're hungry for identity. And the things that used to give us that sense of purpose, we could debate what it is. Faith, patriotism, national identity, hard work used to be a source of identity. Family used to be a sense of identity. Those things have disappeared. And so we have this black hole of a vacuum. And when you have a vacuum that runs that deep, that's when a lot of these social dogmas begin to fill that void instead. Wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, COVIDism, ESGism. And so I think that's also part of what's going on is there's a consumer demand for it. We have this sort of moral hunger that we're trying to satisfy by going to Ben and Jerry's and ordering a cup of ice cream with some social justice sprinkles on top, call that the S of ESG. When in fact, I think the other thing that's happening now is not just the China hypocrisy being exposed. That effect is starting to wear off, right? Because when you're really hungry, you don't fill your hunger with fast food. You can't fill that moral hunger with fast food. We're starting to realize that we're also hungry for something deeper. And so I predict here, and this is an optimistic prediction, that with peak ESG potentially behind us, we're also going to see a hunger for the revival of the nation. National identity. And it's part of, from an investing perspective, I think it's going to be part of an era of deglobalization that we enter. I don't think America is the only country going to go through this. I think Italy's going through it right now. I think Hungary. I think many parts of Western Europe are going through it. I think we're going to see the revival of the idea of the nation. But
whatever is going on right now, they are creating such a mess that, in my opinion, the current agenda is to prove that the West is a failed concept. Late stage capitalism is going to do exactly what Karl Marx predicted, and that is consolidate itself to the point where it's indistinguishable from monarchy and feudalism and all these other failed governments that allow for too much power to develop. Capitalism is subject to the same issues if the government does not prevent companies from growing past a certain point. And I think we're far, far beyond that. We had our monopoly laws, but we never had any laws that dictated how many countries a corporation can operate in, how large their market share globally can be. So you can have companies that are dominating the global landscape, and there's nothing being done about that. There's nothing being done to slow that down or stop that. And now you've got a situation where you've got corporations that are truly global while you still have national governments. So even if you do have a move back toward nationalism, you have a huge power structure that, given a little bit more time, could start to dwarf what we consider to be the real power structures, the governments and our laws and things like that. Well, the thing is, with enough money and enough influence, the laws become a little less rigid when you can lobby your way into some legislative changes, let's say, and you can slowly steer the government. You can't necessarily break the laws, but what you can do is you can steer the laws and have them change so that your business model benefits from it, whatever that business model is. So, I mean, whether or not you're a Marxist, and I hope that you're not if you want to stay in America, we do have some problems that Karl Marx was claiming were going to be a thing. They are a thing. Capitalism is becoming the fundamental power, and money is becoming the fundamental framework for legal processes. And this is going to become a huge issue. As you lose the integrity of your systems to the concept of monetary capture and bribery and corruption and all these things, you are going to start to see some real problems. And we already are seeing some real problems. So if we don't do anything about this now, capitalism is not going to continue to be a great system for the West. Now, the answer is not to destroy it. It seems like they're purposely nosediving the plane into the ground to blow it up and say, oh, see, we told you this would never work. We got to start over. And the other thing, I'm suspicious that they want to start over and create a NATO government where you've got all these failed states under one umbrella with less freedom and less guns and more power and money for the people that control this new multi-nation government potentially. So you have a multi-nation government because why? Oh, you justify it because, well, you've got global corporations. It's a global economy. The nation state is no longer suited for allowing adequate regulation and control over these giant entities. So we are going to have to make a choice. Do we want to stick with global corporations that are poorly policed by nation states, or do we want to return not just to strong nations and nationalism, but also bring back the concept of companies cannot operate in all markets and grow beyond the limits and scope that the system was imagined with. Because I believe that we are getting beyond the imagination of the original architects of capitalism. They you can only think so many moves ahead when you're playing chess. And I think that we are getting to the point where things are getting so crazy, so big, so much money is involved, so much power is involved, so much reach and scale, that it is becoming just a problem on that front of these companies are so big, too big to fail, too big to regulate, too big to benefit humanity and the planet. And ultimately, that is what it's about. It's not making the economy bigger. It's about benefiting the human beings and the animals and the planet that we live on. Not about money, not about Apple stock, not about your profit margins, not about your income, not about any of those things. It is about the quality of life, and we are losing sight of that fact.
Me speaking as an American, I hope we see a revival of the American nation in that context.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here.
So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. And we got a lot more crazy stuff coming up as we speak. So I'll see you guys again soon.